June 1st is less than 2 weeks away, and for thousands of Ontario tenants, that means the rent will be due. But with more than 1 million jobs lost since this pandemic began, paying that rent will be tough for many. Same story for landlords who have mortgage payments, overhead, and payroll to meet. With us now in the provincial capital for a look at what's happening out there, we welcome Tony Irwin. He's president and CEO of the Federation of Rental Housing Providers of Ontario. Geordie Dent, Executive Director of the Federation of Metro Tenants Associations, and Vanmala Subramaniam, business reporter for the Financial Post. And it's good to see you three again. Let's dive right into this. Tony, why don't you start us off? How have landlords been handling, in your view, the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, Steve, thank you for having me. It's been, as you said, very challenging times, but I think, for the most part, landlords and tenants have been working very well together, just trying to get through this crisis. We know it's unprecedented times, but I think for the most part, everyone is handling it very well, and I think that's really good news.
Geordie, would you share that characterization?
Unfortunately, no. I think for most of the tenants we've been talking to, it's end times. A lot of them are terrified. There's a lot of harassment going on, and a lot of big concerns with things like building cleaning and unit entry.
Vanmala, maybe I need you to break the tie on this one. We've got one saying things are basically going okay. We have another describing it as end times. What are you finding?
I'm finding that there's a lot of frustration from both ends of the spectrum. So tenants are saying that landlords are not doing enough. Landlords are saying that the government program is not adequate and they might not want to participate in it. So essentially, I would characterize it as a bit of a mess.
A bit of a mess. Okay, let's play some tape here. We want to get another view on this issue. We interviewed somebody by the name of Alejandra Ruiz, who is chair for the East York chapter of Acorn Toronto. That's a neighborhood in Toronto, which represents low and moderate income families. They did a survey of their members on how the COVID-19 crisis has been affecting them. Let's have a listen to this, and then we'll come back and chat.
We did a survey of 1,177 members across Canada. And what we found out is 70% of these members, they were affected by COVID because they lost their job. And only 45% of these members were able to get CERB and EI. So then we asked another question, they are worried, or can you able to pay the rent for May 1st? And they say 35% of them, they say, we cannot pay the rent. We're very worried. We had to rely on credit cards or family members or high loan interest. That this is very concerned because they're going to be in debt. We are all in this together. Well, I don't think so it's true because we had been affected by COVID, but everybody has been affected differently.
Let's get some reaction to that. Geordie, you've heard those comments. What's your reaction?
They're pretty much in line with what we've been hearing. So I think the numbers that came out around mid-April said about 15% of people weren't able to pay their rent nationally. In Ontario, that'd be 75,000 families, so hundreds of thousands of people. And again, we're getting calls just all the time from people that can't pay. Don't know what they're going to do when the eviction ban is lifted. And while I think there have been some landlords that have been decent around this stuff, a lot of them have been just engaging in just monstrous harassment.
Monstrous harassment. I guess just before I get Tony to comment on that, I should point out that when I ask Tony to roll the clip, I'm not asking Tony Irwin to roll the clip. Our director this week is Tony Burke. He's rolling the clips. Not the fellow representing the landlords here. Having said that, Tony, do you want to come back in and add anything to your initial characterization, which we're hearing some feedback to, is not quite according to Hoyle? What do you say?
So, Steve, what I would say is that, for the most part, and we heard some of the stats, majority of tenants have been paying their rent. That doesn't mean that there aren't tenants who have been impacted due to the pandemic. There absolutely have been. People we know have lost their jobs. Government support may be helping them, but it may not be enough for them to maintain all their, to be able to pay their rent, buy groceries, and pay for other essential expenses. So for tenants who are in that circumstance, we have been saying to our members since the beginning, work with your residents. Those who are having difficulty, let's try to figure out a solution that works together, because we really need to get through this together. So I certainly understand that that's an issue for many families, and our message to our members is work with them, to both parties, work together and try to figure out a solution.
Tony, I should follow up with you in as much as I should give you an opportunity to comment on something that we have heard frequently over the last number of weeks, and that is this notion that some landlords, are taking advantage of this moment in history to kind of purge tenants that they've always wanted to get rid of, and this now gives them the kind of political cover to do so. How much of that is going on?
Well, that's not, I mean, first of all, there is an eviction ban, and we very much understand and support why government came forward very early on in this crisis and instituted that. No one wants to see anyone lose their housing during a global pandemic, and certainly we understand and support that. So if activity is going on apart from that, then that's not okay, and that certainly needs to be addressed.
Vanmala, maybe you can clear up some of whatever misconceptions may be out there on this issue. Is it in fact the case that evictions, tenant evictions at the moment, are banned in the province of Ontario?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because technically speaking, you're not allowed to get a tenant out of their house to enforce an eviction. But that doesn't mean that landlords cannot hand out an eviction notice. So, I've been hearing, at least from, sources that I've talked to, especially in low-income neighborhoods owned by massive landlords like Timber Creek, all these real estate investment trusts, these massive landlords, eviction notices are being issued. It's just that they're not being enforced. And meanwhile, courts are not in session right now, and the Landlord and Tenant Board, so they're not looking at any eviction notices. So what's happening is that you might potentially see a pileup of eviction notices. And when that ban is lifted and you can actually enforce it, you might see a wave of people being asked to leave their homes. So it's not necessarily true that we have a clear moratorium on evictions. They've just kind of been delayed.
Delayed? Do we have any sense of when the province may lift that moratorium?
We don't have any sense of it. I think that the province is generally aware that rent is an issue, and they don't want, it's also bad PR to see people kind of on the streets being let out of their homes during a pandemic. But, a couple of things, if this goes on for months on end, if people stop being able to, collect federal benefits once those benefits run out in October, CERB, for instance, that increases the likelihood of them not paying rent and then evictions. So there are a lot of things in play right now. But as it stands, just to clarify, I know of eviction notices that are being issued, and they're just not being enforced.
Okay, a couple of more quick updates here, Vanmala. What if you're a landlord and the rent that you are allowed to increase under normal circumstances, let's say, would be going up June the 1st? Are those increases still permitted to go forward?
Those increases are still permitted to go forward, but they don't necessarily take effect immediately. So, what's happening right now is there's a lot of negotiating going on between tenants and landlords, where either there's some sort of rent deferment scheme where maybe, the increases will be spread out over the last few months of the year, or, just some sort of scheme that's, being come up. But it's not to say that you're not allowed, if you were pre-approved by the Landlord and Tenant Board to increase rent, an inflationary increase, it doesn't mean that it doesn't come into effect. You might be able to negotiate some sort of, agreement with your landlord. I also want to point out, Steve, that there's a major difference between what's happening with residential tenants and what's happening with commercial tenants. So just a quick example here, I won't go on about this, but with commercial tenants, evictions are being enforced. So, there are numerous small businesses that are now being shut down because they haven't been able to pay rent, and they've had to move out of those premises. So with residential tenants, no one's being evicted, but with commercial tenants, it is actually happening.
But in fairness to the province, they never promised to prevent commercial evictions from taking place. The promise was only to stop residential tenants from being evicted from their places, right?
Correct. Exactly. You're right.
Okay. Very good. Okay. Tony, you've heard some of the answers to those last few questions. Anything you want to weigh in there?
Well, I think our message and what we've been focused on from the beginning of this crisis, Steve, is working with government on a solution to help residents who need it. We have been, as have other political leaders, Mayor Tory, Premier Ford, saying to residents who can pay rent, please pay. It is those who pay who can help rental housing providers help those who cannot. And for those who cannot, we've put forward a plan, a rental assistance program that's been endorsed by the nonprofit housing providers, the co-op housing providers, as a way forward to help tenants who, despite whatever means they may have or whatever assistance they may be receiving from government, it's simply not enough. And we recognize that, and we've been working with government on coming forward with a solution.
Yeah, in a few moments, we will take a look at this issue more from the landlord's point of view in terms of what's not happening for them that they would like to see. But in the meantime, I still just want to dot a few more I's and cross a few more T's when it comes to tenants. We have been hearing, Tony, that the program that the federal and provincial governments put forward, the so-called, I guess they call it the rent backstop program, that kind of thing, whereby the landlord takes a 25% haircut on the rent, the tenant pays 25% of the rent, and the other two governments split the remaining half of the rent. We're hearing that very few landlords are actually taking the governments up on that program. Number one, is that your understanding of the case? And number two, if it is, why is it the case?
So this is not an area that I have a lot of sort of expertise in. Obviously, I'm residential being my main sort of area I spend my time. However, we do have members who do have commercial, perhaps at grade, commercial space within their residential buildings. My understanding, Steve, about this is that, first of all, it's not actually open. The portal is not open yet to be able to apply. There have been some questions around sort of how it works, and CMHC's had to come out with some clarifications around it. But as relates to, and those are things that obviously just need to get worked out, and I'm sure they will. As relates to our members, because my members are mainly residential with small commercial, one issue that we do have or have heard from is that the requirement to have 30% commercial revenue, many of our members don't have that because the majority of their buildings are residential. They have a little bit of commercial. They don't meet the threshold to actually be able to qualify. So we do know that some of these programs have had to be tweaked based on, once they bring them out, recognizing some of the sort of some of the issues that maybe were not foreseen. So perhaps that's something that could be addressed, and we're speaking with the Ontario government about that.
Geordie, just in the last few minutes, we've been talking about different programs, different rules, different regulations, different practices. In your view, are tenants well enough aware of what the situation is in order to be able to either take advantage of programs that are out there for them or understanding what their rights are at this particular moment? What's your view on that?
No, I think a lot of tenants don't really understand what's available for a couple reasons. One, there's not a lot available. So, the federal government waived rent for 6 months, which was great. They unfortunately did that for airlines, spent hundreds of millions of dollars on that. There have been programs, as you've mentioned, for commercial renters, but nothing for residential renters. And I think what tenants are going through is pretty bad. And they're often getting that at the source, which is their landlord. So 2 weeks ago, one of Mr. Irwin's members, Pinedale Properties, was in the news because they went door to door with a debit machine, demanding that tenants max out their credit cards, unit to unit. Tenants were terrified that they were going to get infected. They didn't have any money. You can't get blood from a stone. And those are the three main issues that were kind of encapsulated in one issue that we're hearing all the time, right? People don't have money. They're scrambling to figure out what they're going to do in a couple months, and the landlords, in some cases, going door to door with a debit machine saying, pay now or you're going to get evicted.
Tony, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, that's wrong, and certainly we are advising our members, especially in the time of a global pandemic. You need to be physically distancing. You need to be reaching out to your tenants, but you need to be compassionate. You need to be flexible. You need to be coming up, speaking with them, of course, but about some kind of a plan. And so that that sort of behavior is not okay. Equally, though, I would say, and we were last week, there were some protests that occurred at private homes of some of our members, including one from Pinedale. And I would say that's not okay either. I would say none of those actions are appropriate. And none of them are constructive at really getting to solutions for families and individuals who are in precarious economic times, need help. We all need to, as I say, we all need to be compassionate, and we all need to work together with one another to come up with positive solutions.
Geordie, I guess in the interest of fairness, I should ask the other side of the coin, which is, do you know of tenants who could pay the rent, but are in some respects taking advantage of the current situation not to pay the rent? Because let's face it, some tenants who actually can't pay the rent and are not paying the rent are entitled not to do so because they've worked it out with their landlords. Any of that mischievousness going on in your ideas?
I mean, yeah, I've heard of two major tenants that are doing that. I think The Gap, a multi-billion-dollar company, came right out and said that they're not going to pay their rent. Same thing with A&W. I think they said, in North America, they're not going to pay their rent. So
how about residential tenants, I mean?
No. I mean, I'm pointing that out for a reason. I think a lot of commercial tenants, multi-billion-dollar tenants, are doing that. And no one seems to think it's an issue. But I've taken calls from hundreds, and my agency, thousands of tenants so far during this crisis. I haven't spoken to a single one that has the money and isn't going to pay it. And most tenants pay their rent. And they pay their rent because they like stability. It's kind of the whole point of rental housing. You pay your rent, you don't have to worry about being on the street. So, I haven't talked to anyone that has the money and isn't paying it. And again, I think that, this idea that, again, a bunch of people aren't paying is happening. It's just happening, again, with these kind of large billion-dollar companies, not people making $40,000 a year.
Vanmala, you want to weigh in on that?
Yes. So, absolutely correct. I also know that, in an interview we did with the CEO of RioCan, major commercial and residential, commercial landlord, Staples is not paying their rent. H&M, a big clothing retailer, is not paying rent, and they have just taken a stance saying that they're just not going to be able to do it. Anyway, so but overall, the one thing to remember is that residential tenants literally do not really have any kind of federal support program to help pay their rent. The only thing that has been done is governments have urged landlords to offer some sort of rent deferment. So, that puts the onus on landlords to be generous enough to actually do that. And on the part of small-time landlords, say, a first-time home buyer who has to pay a mortgage and, needs the money from their tenant, the only option for them is to ask their bank for a mortgage deferment. And we've been reporting on stories of these landlords going to their banks and the banks assessing these things on a case-to-case basis. If they don't have good credit, for instance, the landlords, they're saying, sorry, we can't give you a mortgage deferment, which then means the rent from the tenant has to be paid. So there are all these things that are playing out right now, mainly because the only real help for individuals to pay rent is the $2,000 check that the government is giving, and that's if you lose your job because of COVID.
Vanmala, let me do a follow-up on this. And admittedly, this question comes at it a bit from the landlord's point of view. As long as landlords didn't have to pay property taxes, and we know in many municipalities there's been a property tax holiday, you didn't have to pay it for a while, I guess they could get by with no rent coming in or with a reduced amount of rent coming in. But now, for example, the capital city in Ontario, Toronto, has said, sorry, we've got to start collecting property taxes again. But if there's no rent coming in and no revenue coming in, how exactly is that supposed to work for landlords?
Well, I think it would be difficult. It depends on what kind of landlords you're talking about. So for the large companies, to be fair to them, if they are if they're spread out over having commercial tenants as well as residential tenants, and they have a bit more of a diversified portfolio of, revenue streams, it actually is conceivable that even with paying property taxes, they could continue giving some sort of rent deferment or some sort of discounts to tenants. It depends. But for small-time landlords, I can see where they're coming from. I can see that it's an issue for small-time landlords to be able to, offer rent deferment, because a lot of times they don't really have the money to pay their own mortgages. So I think the big companies in my opinion, based on my reporting, haven't really been, offering as much as they could given their balance sheets. But the small time landlords are probably in the same boat as tenants.
Yeah, let me ask Geordie about that. Any sympathy for the small mom and pop landlord operation who, if there's no revenue coming in, and there is now an obligation, as Mayor John Tory said the other day, to start paying your property taxes again, how are they supposed to figure all that out?
I don't know. One of the things that we asked for right off the bat when the crisis hit was some money to help pay the rent for this very reason. One thing I will say though is, you can't forget about the last 10 years. All right. And the last 10 years have been a profit bonanza in the rental sector. Anyone who's rented knows that, rents have been skyrocketing and, there hasn't really been any kind of cost skyrocketing as well. If you look at the balance sheets, she was just mentioning of kind of these large scale landlords, again, it has been a golden age of profits. So, there's a flip side to that, which is that when you're making a lot of this money, you need to salt it away for an emergency. There's some small landlords that make up a very small percentage of the market that might go under because of this. But the vast bulk, we feel should have saved for such an emergency because they were making a lot of money over the last 10 years.
Well, can I just, people may be interested in a clarification on this. You say rents have been skyrocketing. I mean, we have rent review in Ontario. There's a finite amount that landlords are allowed to raise the rent. So when you say the rents have been skyrocketing, what do you mean?
Well, for sitting tenants, rents are again stable, and they only go up by inflation. But I think the average tenant turns over every 4 to 5 years, and when they turn over, when they move out to a different property, there's something called vacancy decontrol, or a lack of vacancy rent control. That's the system they have in Quebec, for example. And what that says is when you move out, the landlord can only raise the rent a certain amount. Well, we don't have that in Ontario. Mike Harris got rid of it, which means you have people moving out of a one bedroom that costs $800, and they look for a place and it's now $2,200. And it's not $2,200 because landlords' costs have gone up that much. It's because that's what they can get on the market. And again, for a lot of landlords, it's gravy. And you can see that in the publicly traded landlord kind of balance sheets. They're making a lot of money. And again, now they've been hit with a crisis, and the hope is that they've put money away for that. But many haven't.
Tony, are there going to be small mom and pop operations that are going to lose their properties, do you suspect, because of the lack of revenue coming in, but the obligation of the expenses to keep going out?
I think there surely will be, yes. I think at the end of the day, though, the thing that's important to keep in mind is, most landlords are good and most tenants are good. We've talked earlier about how, majority of rent is being paid. And I think that's because people want to pay their rent. They know that's what they're obligated to do. Yes, there will be some small landlords who may lose their property and that's, obviously not something anyone wants to see. We do have a housing crisis in the province, and that was the case before the pandemic, and I'm sure it will be the case afterwards. So, that certainly is not something we want to see happen, both for the landlord who may lose their investment property and the housing that it's providing for a family right now. I think that's why we're really focused on trying to advocate to government to really provide assistance for those who need it. And in terms of landlords, what we're doing now, certainly there are many landlords who are providing rent payment plans, deferring rent, all kinds of things for their residents who are unable to pay. And we don't know how that's going to play itself out. We know what results look like in April, and we're watching to see what May looks like, which from a rent payment perspective seems to be in line with April. But what happens a few months down the road? What happens if federal programs end? I think there's still a lot that remains to be seen in terms of how this plays out. And certainly our advice to our members, again, is to reach out, provide plans, work with your residents, and many landlords are doing just that.
Well, as we try to divine what the future may hold, Vanmala, I want to put 2 words to you, which I am increasingly hearing, and you tell me whether this is a thing. And the 2 words are rent strike. This is a movement, particularly, I would suspect, south of the border. But what are you hearing in regards to a possible movement of a rent strike here in Ontario?
What I can tell you, Steve, is the rent strike movement, at least in Toronto, has really been gaining steam over the last few months. And, just the context of this is because rents have been because rents have been going up so much, especially in cities like Toronto, Vancouver, even a place like Ottawa, over the last, since 2011, the last 10 years, 10 years or so, these kinds of solidarity movements that are built around helping others either pay their rent or joining in, commonality and solidarity with people to say, hey, we're not going to pay your rent we're not going to pay our rent if you can't afford to pay your rent. These things are gaining steam. They're also, you can see the number of members on the Rent Strike Facebook group, and the Toronto chapter has really skyrocketed in the last 2 months. So point being, if I were a landlord, I would really be worried about engaging in practices like, say, coming to tenants and asking them to pay using and max out their credit card, because once these things are known, it just fuels a momentum like this, and there are repercussions, I guess, for landlords. But I would say that although that movement is, pretty strong in cities like San Francisco and New York, more than Toronto, it has been building for the last few years because of rent increases.
Geordie, do you endorse the notion of a rent strike?
It's not something that our agency has promoted ourselves. And that's mostly because we're actually afraid that a lot of the large landlords want it. They want actually to push tenants out down the road and just jack up the rents. But again, which rent strike are we talking about? Are we talking about all the commercial operators that are doing that right now? Or are we talking about the tenants who, have just lost all their income? One thing I will say is that a lot of tenants are in a jam right now. They're not getting any help from the feds or the province. Misery and waves of evictions seems to be the plan. So we do support the fact that there's groups out there that are trying to organize people to kind of deal with this and collectively respond. I think that's a good thing because there's a lot of people terrified right now.
Can I assume that whether a commercial tenant does it or a residential tenant does it, it's illegal just to decide you don't want to pay your rent again? Is that right?
Well, define illegal. There's provisions in the law that say, if you don't pay your rent, X, Y, and Z happens. So I don't know if you'd necessarily call it illegal. I mean, it's obviously a violation of the contract in the sense that you're supposed to pay and you haven't. But again, people don't pay rent all the time. And, a lot of commercial operators are not paying rent right now and they're working out a deal. And I mean, I think that's what we'd like to see. If you've got a lot of large scale landlords that have been making a lot of money over the last 10 years, you might have to take a haircut, just have less profit during, again, a global pandemic. And we think these things are best settled through government programs. You give, huge swath of the population money off their rent. You make landlords apply and maybe they, get 80 cents on the dollar or something like that. These are programs you could look at. But the point is that you can't get blood from a stone. Landlord incomes are based off of tenant incomes, and tenant incomes have just been eviscerated. So again, unless you want, hundreds of thousands of people in an eviction queue in 6 months, you got to do something for them.
Tony, obviously the landlords don't want to see a rent strike take place. Do you have any ideas that the landlords would put forward that might avert such a thing from gaining steam?
You're right, Steve. Our members don't want rent strikes. We don't want people to, we want to obviously work with our residents to help them pay their rent. No one wants to see mass evictions. We don't either, any more than anybody else does. I've been asked this question numerous times, and we simply do not. So, in terms of residents whose incomes have been impacted, absolutely, there are many who have. There, of course, also are many who have not. Whose incomes have not been impacted due to the pandemic. And for them, they should be able to carry on and fulfill all of their obligations as they did before the pandemic. But for those who cannot pay their rent because they have lost their job, because they have very real issues and impacts on them personally, we need to work with them. And the we is the collective we. Governments, housing providers, tenants themselves, we all need to work together. I think that has to be the path forward.
Okay. I want to thank the three of you for coming on to TVO tonight and helping us better understand the lay of the land. Tony Irwin from the Federation of Rental Housing Providers of Ontario, Geordie Dent from the Federation of Metro Tenants Associations, and Vanmala Subramaniam from the Financial Post. Good to see you all, and be safe out there, okay, you three?
Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you.
Thank you so much.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.